Growing up, nobody talked to me about finances. It was even a touchy subject to talk to anyone about. Even in school, they hardly talked about finances and how you should master them. So in this video, I'll be talking about what I've learned in the last 10 years that has helped me get out of debt, stay out of debt, and master my personal finances. So I encourage you to stick around until the end of the video, where I'm gonna be laying out 4 easy steps that anyone can apply today that will make your finances for the next year and going on so much better. So stick around. The first part I want to talk about is how schools don't even talk about personal finances to any extent. For example, I never learned about credit scores. I never learned about credit cards. I never learned about doing your taxes. I never learned about emergency funds, how you should have 3 to 6 months in emergency funds. But hey, at least I learned about sine, cosine, and tangents. I use that on my taxes all the time. And since I never learned about personal finance in school, and my family in large part were just terrible with personal finances of their own, I really had no one to look up to for personal finances. Coming out of school, when I got into my first job, I didn't know that they took taxes out of my paycheck. So I was expecting to take this certain amount of salary that I was offered and just divide it by 12, and I was gonna have that amount of money every month. Unfortunately, when I got my first paycheck, I was missing like 20-25% of my money. I was like, where'd this go? Who's FICA? Why am I paying Social Security tax when I don't even have Social Security? What is it even? So there's all these little tidbits that you never learn in school that you use every day in your regular life. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I just want to go through personal finances and my journey as well. So before I talk about the top 4 tips that I have for you to improve your finances, things that I used in my personal life to improve mine, I'm going to be talking about some of the statistics in America and how poorly educated people really are about finances. The first incredible statistic is 4 in 5 people aged 18 to 35 actually failed a financial literacy test. Second, 2 in 3 families don't have an emergency fund of at least 3 to 6 months. And third, at least 60% of families have had at least some sort of credit card debt in the last year. I talked about this in another video of mine. I'll have a link up here that you can click to check out as well. The fourth, 8 in 10 adults live paycheck to paycheck. And the worst statistic of them all is 3 in 5 adults don't even make a budget for their monthly expenses. And that's where I think a lot of the problems are. People don't know where their money is going, so they're just spending every single day, but when they look back on the month, they could never tell you where their money had gone. And when we look at those statistics, it's no wonder why everyone I grew up around, they always thought that having debt was just part of life. There was no other way to live. Nobody ever talked about being debt-free, not worrying about paying bills. I always thought that's how life was gonna be when I grew up. So that's why when I was very young, I knew that I wanted to have so much money that all the bills would be paid. I would have plenty of money left over in the bank account that I could do whatever I wanted. I could travel, I could buy the things I wanted, buy things for my children. Everything that I never had growing up, I knew I wanted. And so that's why I worked so hard to get where I am today. Unfortunately, I probably lost about 5 years of financial life just due to not knowing where my money was going. And that's where the tips I'm about to share that I use myself are going to change the way you think, change the way you spend your money, and change the way that you live. At the end of the day, everyone wants to live better. Everyone wants to have a better life for themselves. Nobody wants to live paycheck to paycheck. Nobody wants to be average. Unfortunately, people just get stuck in that cycle of being average. So in this video, I'm gonna help you be above average and teach you about some simple tips that people use to get wealthy. And these are what I have done so far to get where I am today. So for the first tip, budgeting. You need to know where all of your money is going, where all your money is coming in, and having a plan for every dollar that you make. If you have debt, you need to organize where that money is going to make sure your debts are getting paid off and all of your current bills are getting paid. You also need to eat, so make sure you have enough money to eat. That's where budgeting is going to play a huge role. When I started budgeting, I saw where all of my wasteful spending was going. All of the restaurants I was going out to eat, all of the things I were buying that I didn't actually need, I was able to cut those out of my budget and get my debt paid off. I started with over $50,000 of debt about 2 years ago, and a year after that, I had got that entire amount of debt paid off just through strict budgeting. But the important thing with budgets is you can't just set a budget. You have to create new habits around how you spend your money. You have to be intentional of what you're doing with your money. Otherwise, you're just gonna fall back into the same trap, the same routine where you get back into the bad habits you had before. So make sure you master budgeting. There are plenty of apps that you can use. Bank of America has some budgeting tools on their app, but also other free apps like Mint. I've used Mint for many years and I'm not getting paid to talk about them. I just personally love that app because it allows you to connect all of your bank accounts no matter where they are and all of your debts, and you can see where all of your money is going. The second tip I have is don't worry about having FOMO, the fear of missing out. See, a lot of people buy things that they don't need, like expensive fancy cars or expensive phones, fancy cameras, fancy clothes, all of these different things that they don't really need, but they just want to impress their friends. See, the thing is, if you try to impress people that aren't paying your bills are gonna go haywire. And once I learned not to care about what kind of car I was driving or what kind of clothes I was wearing or what other people thought about what I was doing with my money, that's where I saw everything change, because you're not worrying about having the latest and greatest phone. You're not worrying about having the latest and greatest technology or whatever it may be for you. So be okay with being different. Remember, if you want to live like nobody else in the future, then you have to live like nobody else is willing to live today. And that's the only way to become wealthy. If you look at any millionaire or billionaire today, they did things in the past that people weren't willing to do so that today they can live like nobody else is living today. And a personal example, if I listened to everyone around me, I wouldn't have tripled my income in just 2 years. I wouldn't have got investing into real estate at the age of 23 to whereas now my investment has more than doubled in the last 5 years to over $1 million. Most importantly, I wouldn't be debt-free today. So it's okay to miss out on some things for now and then make that up in the future. And moving on to number 3, having an emergency fund. Having an emergency fund is so important. An emergency fund is just 3 to 6 months of your expenses. You can find this out from taking your budget that you just created and tripling it or 6-timing it to see how much money you would need in the bank to have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months. This is important because if anything happens, especially as we've seen in the last year, if anything happens to your job, you don't want to be stressed out and not able to pay the bills where you can't get caught back up. For example, for me, I had lost my job before I started budgeting and before I had an emergency fund. And I was just looking for any job I could get, taking whatever job. Even if I didn't like the job, I had to take it because I needed the income. Whereas when I had an emergency fund, I had budgeted and everything. When I lost my job, I was able to just take my time, not worry about it, because I knew I had money in the bank that I would be able to live off and I wasn't going to be homeless or go hungry. So I was able to be more picky with what job I wanted to have. And that's why it's so important to get an emergency fund. However much you need to be comfortable for a few months is what you should go for. And the fourth and final tip that I have is to build and track your credit score. I never knew what a credit score was until I was in my early 20s trying to buy a house. That's when I learned that having a good credit score really would change everything as far as getting a mortgage and paying, less interest. When you have a low credit score, if it's too low, you can't even qualify for a mortgage. But if it's low or in the medium range, then you're going to pay a higher interest rate than someone that has a much better credit score. For example, you would want a credit score of at least 740 to 760 to get a good rate on a house. So if that's important, you need to make sure you know what your credit score is and you need to know what you can do to increase it. For example, if you have a lot of debt, especially credit card debt, that's really going to hurt your credit score. You want to make sure you're paying all of your bills on time. If you miss a payment by more than 30 days, then that can have a really long-lasting detrimental effect on your credit score as well. The next thing is just monitor your credit score. I have multiple apps like Credit Karma and some other apps that I use to monitor my credit score and make sure nothing changes that I need to know about. But most importantly, just making sure it's on track to continue improving and recover from when I wasn't good with money. And I'm happy to say that it has improved dramatically by over 200 points in 2 years. So if you have a bad credit score, or if you don't know what your credit score is, I highly encourage you to use an app. It could be Credit Karma or any other app that you like, but just make sure you're monitoring your credit score. So no matter where you are today, if you take the 4 tips that I just laid out seriously, I know that in the next 6 months to a year, you're going to be in a much better place. I know when I had a lot of debt, I didn't know where my finances were. Everything was just negative in my life because of money. So don't let money take control of you. Take control of your money. So if you found any of these tips helpful, or if you just enjoyed the video, I would appreciate if you liked the video, left a comment of what you thought and how you're doing in your personal finance journey, and subscribe for more content. I will be releasing more videos about personal finance, real estate investing, and just personal development in general. If you're interested in any of that, definitely subscribe and check my channel out for some of my videos I've already created. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.